Few people truly grasped just how vast his passions were, or how generously he championed an incredibly wide array of causes over the decades. Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth demonstrated a rock-solid devotion to one another throughout their long union. Yet, after more than 7 decades of marriage, Prince Philip made a decision that stunned the world. He chose to stop living with the Queen. The public was left asking what had gone wrong. Was this something deeply personal, or was there a bigger story buried beneath the surface? For years, the real answer stayed hidden. But now, in a remarkable disclosure, Princess Anne, alongside King Charles and Prince Andrew, has finally pulled back the curtain on the true reason behind their father's departure. Stay with us as we uncover the untold story of why Prince Philip no longer lived with Queen Elizabeth at Buckingham Palace. Princess Anne has finally broken her silence. Princess Anne, the only daughter of Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth, has left the world speechless with what she has shared. For years, people speculated endlessly about why Prince Philip chose to leave Buckingham Palace in his final chapter of life rather than remain at his wife's side. But the truth is now out. Princess Anne, widely regarded as her father's closest confidant, has revealed the real reason behind his choice, and her brothers, King Charles and Prince Andrew, have both stepped forward to back up her account. A bond unlike any other. Unlike the stiff, formal relationships often associated with royal households, Princess Anne and her father, Prince Philip, shared something genuinely special. She was widely seen as her father's favorite, and it's not hard to understand why. The two were cut from the same cloth: outspoken, sharp-tongued, stubborn, strong-willed, and armed with a dry humor that could cut through a room. Neither had much patience for those who couldn't keep up. But beneath all of that was something far more powerful: an unshakable loyalty. Neither could find fault in the other. They teased each other relentlessly, yet never lost an ounce of mutual respect. Over the years, while their brothers were consumed by their own royal obligations, Princess Anne was paying a close attention to what was really happening between her parents. She saw beyond the perfectly curated smiles and the picture-perfect royal couple the world believed in. She witnessed the reality behind closed doors. And Prince Philip trusted her enough to confide in her, sharing the quiet struggles he carried within his marriage to Queen Elizabeth. But to truly understand why Prince Philip ultimately made the choice he did, we have to go back to the very beginning, long before Princess Anne or her brothers ever existed. Where it all began. Queen Elizabeth, then simply Princess Elizabeth, first crossed paths with Prince Philip at a wedding in 1934. He was 13 years old. She was just 8. There was no romantic spark that day. That would come 5 years later. When they met again, Princess Elizabeth was 13 and Philip was 18. She hadn't come alone. Her parents and younger sister were with her on a visit to the Britannia Royal Naval College in Dartmouth, Devon, where they were scheduled to meet with a group of cadets. Philip was among them. But an outbreak of mumps and chickenpox threw the plans into disarray. Instead of attending the chapel service as planned, the royal visitors retreated to the headmaster's house, and Philip, one of the few cadets unaffected by the illness, was sent to keep the young princess's company. He wasn't the type to sit still for long. Before anyone knew it, Philip had led the princesses outside, jumping over tennis nets and playing croquet with a boundless athletic energy that seemed to fill the entire grounds. Princess Elizabeth was captivated. From that moment, something shifted inside her, and she would later say she never looked at another man the same way again. A teenage infatuation quickly grew into something deeper. She wrote to him faithfully while he served with the Royal Navy during the war. She kept his photograph in her bedroom. By 1946, Philip had returned from the Pacific, and their relationship had fully blossomed. That same year, he dropped to one knee on the grounds of Balmoral and proposed. In a letter from that time, he wrote of being spared by war, of finding victory, of needing rest, and of having fallen in love so completely that even the world's greatest troubles felt small by comparison. Yet the path to marriage was far from straightforward. Queen Elizabeth's father, King George VI, had reservations. He worried his daughter was too young, that she might be settling for the first man who had caught her eye. The royal family stayed publicly silent about Philip's intentions. There was resistance from other quarters, too. Despite Philip carrying genuine royal blood, he and Elizabeth were actually third cousins, both direct descendants of Queen Victoria. Many within the establishment viewed him as too rough around the edges, too German, too Greek, too foreign, not the right fit for the future Queen of England. But Elizabeth had made her mind up, and nothing was going to change it. It wasn't until July 1947, following her 21st birthday, that the engagement was formally announced. Before the wedding, Philip renounced his Greek and Danish royal titles, joined the Church of England, formally received by the Archbishop of Canterbury in October of that year, and took on the anglicized surname Mountbatten. On November 20th, 1947, Princess Elizabeth and Philip were married at Westminster Abbey. They honeymooned at Broadlands in Hampshire, the estate of Philip's uncle, Earl Mountbatten. But what lay ahead was something Philip could never have fully prepared for. When everything changed. They were in Kenya on safari when the news reached them. Philip informed Elizabeth of her father's death. She understood immediately what it meant, and they flew home at once. Upon landing, she became Queen Elizabeth II. Philip's title remained unchanged, not king consort, but simply royal consort. Philip stood by her without complaint. He abandoned his naval ambitions and committed himself entirely to the monarchy. On June 2, 1953, the coronation took place at Westminster Abbey. When the Archbishop finished, it was Philip who was the first to kneel before his wife, pledging his allegiance. But living that pledge, day after day, year after year, was far harder than the ceremony made it appear. He walked behind her in public. He deferred to her in matters of state. He had no formal authority. He once admitted that when he asked what was actually expected of him, people simply stared back blankly. There was no rule book. He had to invent the role as he went along. One of the earliest flashpoints came from his uncle, Lord Mountbatten, who declared publicly that the House of Mountbatten now reigned in England, meaning Philip's surname would pass to their children. Queen Mary and Prime Minister Winston Churchill immediately shut this down, insisting the House of Windsor would continue unchanged. Philip was furious. He described himself as the only man in the country not permitted to pass his name on to his own children. The words carried real pain behind them. Eventually, Elizabeth found a compromise. In 1960, she announced that their descendants would carry the hyphenated surname Mountbatten-Windsor, a gesture of recognition for the man who had given up so much for her. Despite the frustrations, Philip threw himself into shaping the modern monarchy. He pushed for the coronation to be televised over considerable opposition, and more than 20 million people watched. He became the first royal to sit for a television interview. He invited cameras into our private spaces. He pushed Elizabeth to end the outdated debutante presentations and introduced informal lunches and garden parties to bring the monarchy closer to ordinary people. He reorganized royal estates, modernized royal operations, and by the 1980s had authored 9 books. He taught Elizabeth to use a teleprompter, encouraged her televised Christmas messages, and was the first royal to use a computer. He was, in every sense, a man of restless intellect, doing an enormous amount of invisible work. Rumors, tension, and unwavering loyalty. Like any couple, especially one living under such extraordinary pressure, Philip and Elizabeth had their rough patches. Stories of Philip's flirtatious nature circulated for years. He was linked in gossip columns to a Russian ballerina, an English stage actress, and a writer, among others. A Baltimore newspaper once reported he was meeting an unnamed woman regularly in a West End apartment. The palace denied everything. Philip himself addressed the gossip with characteristic sarcasm, pointing out that he had never gone anywhere without a police escort, making secret rendezvous rather logistically inconvenient. Royal biographer Sarah Bradford offered a more nuanced take, suggesting that Philip had simply learned over time to be more careful where his natural charm was displayed, but no affair was ever confirmed. What was confirmed, repeatedly and publicly, was his devotion to Elizabeth. On their 50th anniversary, she described him as her strength and stay. On their golden, diamond, and platinum anniversaries, she never failed to acknowledge him as the quiet foundation beneath everything she had built. Then came 2017. After more than 70 years of marriage, something shifted. In May of that year, Philip announced his retirement from public life. He officially stepped down from royal duties on August 2, 2017, attending his final engagement with the Royal Marines at the age of 96. Buckingham Palace confirmed that the Duke of Edinburgh would no longer undertake public engagements, though he might occasionally appear alongside the Queen, something that, in practice, rarely happened. After his retirement, Philip did not stay at Buckingham Palace. Instead, he relocated to Wood Farm on the Sandringham estate, a quiet, modest property with historical significance as the former home of Prince John, the youngest and most private son of King George V, who had lived there in gentle seclusion until his passing in 1919. Why here? In an interview back in 2011, Philip, then 90, had said plainly that he simply wanted to enjoy himself. And Queen Elizabeth fully supported him. She understood better than anyone what he had sacrificed, and she wanted him to finally have time that was truly his own. At Sandringham, Philip rediscovered himself. He took up carriage driving, a passion that replaced polo, which his arthritic wrists had forced him to abandon. When even carriage driving became too physically demanding, he turned to watercolor painting and reading, history over fiction, and to long, unhurried conversations with old friends. He and Elizabeth spoke by phone every single day, sharing the details of how each had spent their hours. The Queen and other family members visited regularly, but Philip had found something at Wood Farm he couldn't have at the palace: genuine peace, and a life that belonged, at last, to him. What had begun as a temporary arrangement quietly became permanent. Philip recognized that returning to Buckingham Palace would only pull him back into royal life despite his retirement. The simplicity of Wood Farm suited him in a way the grandeur of the palace never could. A sudden reunion and a final chapter. Then something no one had anticipated brought them back under the same roof: a global pandemic. In March 2020, with the COVID-19 lockdown announced, Philip left Sandringham and joined Elizabeth at Windsor Castle. The press affectionately dubbed their arrangement the HMS Bubble. They kept in contact with family via video calls, navigating an extraordinary moment in history together, as they had navigated so many moments before. On July 22, 2020, Philip made what would turn out to be his final public appearance, stepping into the Windsor Castle quadrangle to formally transfer his role as Colonel-in-Chief of the Rifles to the Duchess of Cornwall. It was the last time the cameras captured him. In January 2021, both Philip and Elizabeth received their COVID-19 vaccinations at Windsor. Then, in February, Philip was admitted to King Edward VII's hospital after feeling unwell, walking in on his own, though the public held its breath. He was treated for an infection and underwent a successful cardiac procedure before being discharged and returning home. Talk of his upcoming 100th birthday filled the news, but those close to him sensed Philip wasn't looking forward to it. Perhaps, some have quietly suggested, he already knew he would not reach it. On the morning of April 9, 2021, Prince Philip passed away peacefully at Windsor Castle. He was 99 years old. Queen Elizabeth was by his side. The palace described his death as peaceful. Elizabeth later spoke of the immense emptiness he left behind. He was laid to rest on April 17, 2021, at St. George's Chapel, Windsor Castle, temporarily placed alongside 25 other coffins, including that of King George III. His final will was sealed for a minimum of 90 years, purported to protect sensitive matters pertaining to the royal family's reputation. How his children remember him. Princess Anne, reflecting on her father's legacy, described him as her teacher, her supporter, and her most honest critic. She spoke of his rare gift for engaging with every person he met as a fully formed individual, recognizing their skills and their worth regardless of who they were. She acknowledged the irreplaceable role he played in steadying Elizabeth as she ascended the throne at such a young age, giving her the confidence to reign with authority she might not have found so quickly on her own. King Charles paid tribute to a man who had spent 70 years in quiet, extraordinary service, to the Queen, to the family, to the nation, and to the Commonwealth, with a level of energy and dedication that left those around him in awe. Prince Andrew recalled a father who cherished private family time above almost everything else, a man whose public persona barely hinted at the warmth he showed behind closed doors. Together in the end. About a year after Philip's passing, on September 8, 2022, Queen Elizabeth II died at the age of 96. She was laid to rest beside her beloved husband at the King George VI Memorial Chapel. Even in death, they were together again. Prince Philip's choice to live apart from the Queen in his final years was never about a fracture in their bond. It was about a man who had spent a lifetime in devoted service, finally allowing himself a few quiet years to simply be, and a wife who loved him enough to let him have them. What do you think of Prince Philip's decision? Was there something more beneath the surface, or was it simply the choice of a man who had earned his rest? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this story moving, make sure to like, subscribe, and click on the next video. You won't want to miss it.